Hi, I'm John Rofrano, Senior VASST Trainer here for Boris TV, and welcome to the Boris Continuum Complete for Vegas Pro Training Series. In this episode, we're going to take a look at a new filter in BCC 8 called Particle Effects 3D, and in particular, how to do layer mapping. Now, this motion graphic might look familiar to some of you because it's been done before on Boris TV using After Effects. But Vegas editors have written in and said, could you please show us how to do this in Vegas? And so, I'm going to show you the same motion graphic done entirely in Vegas. Now, After Effects users have had particles for a long time, so I assume they're familiar with the terms like emitters and particles. But Vegas users have not, and so I want to start this with a little bit of Particles 101 so you get familiar with the terms and how they work. Okay, let's start with an empty project, and I'm just going to insert a video track, and then I'm going to insert an empty event, and I apologize for this menu going off the screen here. Then I'll click to add an event effects, and you will find Particle Emitter 3D under BCC Particles. So we're just going to add Particle Emitter 3D here. Now before we start, let me just show you what comes in the presets because they're pretty impressive. I'll start the timeline and just go through the presets. So this one's called Bad Leak. This one is Basic Spawn Bursts. And look at how organic they look. Here's a boom with debris. There's some bubbling water, a data wave. I'm just going through these. Some really, really nice effects here. Right? These explosive bursts, really neat. And they will interact with other layers. We'll show you that in future tutorials. Here's some flames, fluffy snow. So I encourage you to find something that's close to what you want and then modify it from there. Look at that smoke, some sparks and flares, just lots and lots of good stuff. Spawning smoke trails, love them. All the way down to this cloud fly through. This is great for opening sequences and titles and stuff like that. So again, I encourage you to go through, start with something that's close to what you want and then modify it. But we're going to start from scratch because I want you to understand, how to use the plugin without any presets. So we'll go back to the default. So let's talk about emitters for a moment. And let me start this with the default emitter. What you can see is happening here is the default emitter is just particles coming out of a point. Now, if we think about emitters and particles as a cannonball and cannons, the emitter is the cannon. It's what shoots out the cannonballs. The particles are the cannonballs themselves. So if it has anything to do with the direction that you want things to go in, right, you would point the cannon in a different direction to get things to spray in a different direction. You want to go to your emitter because that's what's generating the particles. The particles themselves being the cannonballs, if you wanted to change the size or the shape or the color, you would go to the particle. So let's start with the emitter and just see what we have. In opening up the emitter, there's only a couple things we have to tweak here to make this motion graphic, and usually just a couple things that you're going to play with anyway. The first is the birth rate. So that is how many things are being born, how many particles are being born. And if I up it, you can see lots more particles are shooting out. If I bring it down, a lot less particles are shooting out. So the birth rate is kind of the fire rate of the cannon. How many cannonballs are going to come out in rapid succession. The particle speed is how fast they're coming out. So I can make them come out a lot faster. So here we got lots of particles. And you'll notice as they're going faster, some of these appear to be going slower. You're kind of like, what's up with that? Let me stop it so you can see. We go here, there's these particles in the back that appear to be moving slower. Well, don't forget, this is Particle Effects 3D. So this particle emitter, if I rotate it on the Y scale, and I'll just hold my control key to get fine control, this really is three-dimensional. So the ones that look like they're going slower are actually firing out the back of the emitter because this emitter is firing randomly in all directions, right? All right, let's start this back up again. So we've seen the birth rate, we've seen the particle speed. The other thing that's important to understand is the particle lifespan, and that's how long the particles live. So I'm going to lower the speed here. And now you see the particles aren't quite reaching the edge of the screen. They're disappearing. They're popping off the screen here before they reach the edge. And that's because the lifespan is set to 2 seconds. If I were to make the lifespan longer, they would go further in that slow amount of time. If I make it shorter, they would go less in that amount of time. So the lifespan controls how long a particle lives, the speed controls how fast the particle goes, and the birth rate controls how many particles I'm going to generate. The last thing I want to look here in emitters is the emitter shape. So let me set the speed to 0, and now you can see that this emitter is just a point in the emitter shape, and it says a point here. I can change it to sphere, and now you'll see that really these particles are being emitted from a sphere. And again, if I stop this and I go down and try to rotate it, you'll see that this really is a sphere in 3D space. Okay, so all of this stuff is being done in 3D space. So I've got a sphere. I also have a box. You could emit them in a box, and then I could emit them from a layer map, and that's what I'm going to show you how to use to get through this motion graphic. Okay, enough of the emitters. Let's go down and talk about the particles. So I'm going to set this back to a point, and we'll get some particle speed going here so we can see them coming out. And we'll go down to the particles themselves. Now the particles can be created from a number of things. The default here is this image collection, and then you can see there's a bunch of different images that can be used, and these are all in a folder. You can make your own actually and place them in this folder. And so we've got a bunch of images, different images that can be used, and I'm going to increase the size here so you can really see. All right, these are clouds. There are some feathers popping out here, and you can really see the feathers. So there's lots of different images you can use to create your particles. Then there's the host image layer, and so if I had an image layer here, and we'll do that later, you could use the host image layer. There's round blurs, there's spheres, there's cylinders, there's cars, just lots of stuff that you can use to generate as particles. You'll notice that I can control the size of the particle, and then we can even control the randomness of the size. So if you want to make some of them smaller, some of them larger, and we're going to see how you can do that. And of course we can change the color, and we'll do that in the demo. Now the last thing I want to show here is this noise field. So I'm going to go change this back to image collection, and we'll go back up to this default white round blur. I'm going to go back up to my emitter. Instead of random, I want to show you that you can emit in different directions. So I could emit to the left, I could emit to the right, so you can control the direction of this emitter. I'm going to emit these as a disk, and then because they're a disk and we're looking at the top of the disk, I'm going to rotate it on the X just a bit. So now the particles are coming towards us on this disk, and I'm going to go down to the fractal field. And I just want to show you fractal field for a moment. Now fractal field introduces noise, right, into anything that it does, you know, and it could be the pattern, it could be the size itself. So for the movement, I'm going to introduce a little noise, and you see now how they're jiggling around, right? If I'm going to hold down the shift key and go past 100, the more noise, the more they jiggle. What's controlling this is the noise frequency. So if I take this frequency down, right, you can see it's just kind of a little bit of random movement. If I take the frequency way up, and again I can hold the shift key, right, I get really, really jittery stuff. So when you're using the fractal field, the things that you really want to concentrate on are the noise frequency, and then how much you apply, how much movement you apply to it. Okay, that's enough to get us started. Let's go make our motion graphic. So I'm going to stop this, and I'm just going to create a new project here. And the first thing I want to do is I'm going to create that bottom. I've got a little blue grid that I'm just going to drag down on the timeline. There was a floor that all of this was being created on, and I just created it with a simple blue grid. So this is a PNG file. I open this up and go to BCC Lights, and then BCC Spotlight. And then with the BCC Spotlight, I took this Dr. T Cool Low Spot Edges, and then I opened up my track motion. Get this back to the beginning. Set it to 3D on the source alpha, and then just rotated it back a bit and moved it down towards the bottom. Make it a little bigger. I know it's hard to see on the screen what's going on, but you can kind of see what's going on there. And this is just how I made that floor. I mean, that's all it was. Just a little something to set the stage. Now we're going to insert a video track. And then on the video track, and I'll go up here so you can see it doesn't go off the screen, I'm going to insert text media. Boris BCC 8. I'll highlight that, and I'll select a new font. We'll use the Denmark font. Make it a little bit bigger. Now this text is going to be my layer map. And so every place you see the white, that's where I'm going to emit particles from. So let's apply BCC particles to that. We'll go to the particles, particle emitter 3D. And now we're ready to create our effect. You'll notice that the text has disappeared. Don't worry about that. We're just using it as a map layer. And I'll open up, start with my emitter, start playback. And I want to use, remember I showed you point, sphere, and box. I didn't show you layer map. That's what I'm going to show you now. We'll select layer map, and then under the emitter layer, I'm going to pick the source layer. And so now, what's happening is these points are actually coming out from the text layer. But we can't really tell that yet. And what I want to do is take the particle speed down to 0, and now you can see them starting to fill up this text layer. Now I'm going to adjust the birth rate because I don't have enough of them. Right? And even at 100, it's kind of not big enough. And so I'm going to hold the shift key and move out even further until, there we go. There's BCC 8. And so about 750, 775. It's also a little bit smaller than I want. So I'm going to go down to, here's a scale master. And I'm going to bring that scale up just about there. I don't want it to be too big on the screen. And maybe a couple more parts. So I'm going to set the particles to 1,000. Okay. So now we've got the particles filling up the screen. And I'm going to turn off my bottom layer for a moment just to get my frame rate up. There we go. And we'll go back. Okay, the next thing that happened was the particles moved on the screen from the left. So that's done with keyframing the position. So I'm going to open up the position here, and I'm going to move it back a bit, and I'm going to hold my shift key to move beyond the edge. I don't want to move it totally off, and I want to make sure it's centered, so I'm going to keep this at a half. Because I want some of the particles to be seen because they're going to be swirling around. And so I want to make sure I can see the swirling at the beginning. And now I'm going to stop playback because I want to get very precise about where I put my keyframes. I'll open up animation and we will create a keyframe. So that first keyframe now is here. And then at about the 1 second mark, and actually this is 5 seconds by default. I think this whole thing was 6 seconds when I created it initially, so we'll bring this over to 6 seconds. At the 1 second mark, I want this to be totally on the screen, so I'm just going to double click over here, and that will bring it to the middle of the screen. And let's play that back and see what we got. So here they are taking a second to go on the screen, but actually you'll notice some of them are trailing off the edge, and that's because there's a thing called inertia. And if we look down here, there's inertia from emitter, and if we bring that down to 0, you'll see that they come on the screen and they just stop, right? And so if you want them to stop in place, you would set the inertia down to 0, but I kind of like the fact that they go off to the side. So now we've done everything we're going to do with the emitter for now. So the emitter is emitting these particles, it's moving along so that the particles start moving, and then it is coming to rest at the 1 second mark to show us our layer map. Next we'll move on to the particles. I want to start by selecting the particle image, and I want the sparkle for 4-point flare. And these are kind of, I like these because they're kind of like little dots of light. And so I want to adjust the size here a little bit, make them just a little bit bigger, and add some randomness to the size. Right, now it's starting to look good. So I've got some that are smaller, some that are bigger coming on the screen. Don't like the white though, so let's go change the white. And I think we had this kind of a purplish color. I'm gonna move this back, kind of a purplish blue. Ooh, I like that. Right about there. So now we've got the color that we want, but notice they're looking a little bit flat, a little dull. As we move down, there's a blend mode, and I'm going to change the blend mode to add. Now they look more like dots of light. And you know, add mode, if you think about light, when you take two lights, you shine them in the same place, that place gets brighter, right? Two flashlights shined on one place, it gets brighter. So as these particles come in front of each other, they become additive and they become brighter in those spots where the particles overlap. Now I've got the particles looking the way I want, and I'm going to move down to the fractal field. And remember we said with fractal field, we're just going to play with the movement. And as I bring it up to 100, I get this nice wavy movement, but I want it to be crazy. If I hold the shift key and go beyond, you can see how now it starts really getting some crazy movement. And in fact, I know that I want this to be 2000. I really want big moves, right? I want these things to really swirl in and be big. And so just one parameter movement is all I want to play with. But I do want to keyframe it. So I'm going to stop here so that I can keyframe. We'll go to the beginning and drop a keyframe. So I'll do a plus there. And I want to make sure that, that I've got movement here. So let me animate, go down. I'm going to select movement so I know I'm making movement keyframes. And then I click the plus key to add a keyframe. When I get to the 1 second mark, the graphic is going to be in the middle of the screen, but I still want it to be kind of wacky at that point. So I'm going to drop another keyframe and I'm going to leave it at 2000 so that the whole thing is going to be really displaced, and then maybe come a little further down, maybe another second down here, and then I'm going to bring it back down to 0. Now let's see how that looks. So here they are really coming around and then back to 0 to do the Boris BCC8. Nice. And I'm done with fractal field. I think I made those particles a little too purple. I want to just go change them and get them a little more into the blue so they match the grid that I'm going to turn on again. A little bit better. Okay. Now, we've got them coming in, we've got them swirling around, we've got them coming to rest. The last piece of this had the particles blowing forward at us. And so that's going to be done with the speed. So I want to go back up to the emitter and decide where I want this to happen. And I think right about this 4 second mark here, we can have these start to blow back towards us. So at 4 seconds, I'm going to keyframe the particle speed. So I'll go back to 0 and set a keyframe. Now, if you're not familiar with keyframing, I just want to explain what I'm doing here, why I keep going back to 0. So here's particle speed. What I want to do is say that I want it to start at 0, then I'm going to come just before the 4 second mark and set another keyframe that's also at 0. So this entire time it's going to be at 0, and then just a little bit after it, I'm going to have it start to ramp up to the speed that I want it to be, and then that's when I'll increase the particle speed. In fact, we'll get that thing way up. So let's take a look at it now. So it comes around, and then particles start to blast out. But I want the particles to blast out toward me, right, toward the user. So I want to come down to the emitter and change the direction. So from random, I'm going to say forward, and that's going to get us even closer. So here now they're going to blow forward at us. There they go. And you might want them to blow forward in that crazy fashion like that. But what if you wanted them just to blow straight forward? There's the spread parameter here. And if I bring the spread down to 0, now they're going to come straight out at us. And I kind of like that a little bit better. So that's pretty much the entire motion graphic. The rest of what I did was just a little bit of window dressing. And so let me stop this. I'm going to go on and add film glow because I like to make this glow just a bit. And we'll go to the film glow, and I want to tweak the glow threshold. But now let's play this back, and you can see just a little more magical, just a little bit more glow. I really kind of like the way the film glow. And let me show you this at the end where they're all coming at us. This is without the film glow, and this is with the film glow. It just kind of makes it pop just a little bit more. And then because we kind of need a reason for these things to blow out, we can add something that shows that something happened. We can add one last effect, which is BCC lights and lens flare 3D. And in fact, I think I want the lens flare to be before the glow, so we're just going to drag it and drop it over here so the lens flare has a glow. And in the lens flare, there's a preset that I like, which is this light beam. And we'll put this in the 0.5, which is right in the center. And then what I want to do is I want to play with the global intensity here. And so I'll come just before this 4-second mark, and we're going to keyframe the global intensity. So I'm going to bring it all the way down. I'm going to go back to the beginning on my lens flare, and I'm going to set a keyframe. Then I'll go to just before the 4-second mark. We're going to set another keyframe so that it's going to be 0 and 0, and then we'll come right after the 4-second mark and bring up the global intensity a bit so we can see this. And right about there, and then come a little bit later. So let's take a look at this and see what we got. So here we got them swirling, coming on the screen, and then a little pulse there, and they blow forward. And I can go back and turn on my second track here, so you can see them with the grid on the bottom. And there's the complete effect. So that wraps it up. Hopefully now you understand how to use Particle Effects 3D with layer mapping a little better. If you need more information, drop by boriseffects.com. This is John Rofrano for Boris TV. Until next time, thanks for watching.